Hello everyone, today I have a different video. I wanted to talk about this because I've had people reach out to me, and at the same time I was a little bit hesitant about talking about this as well, so please bear with me. It's also been a while because I literally just went to our honeymoon. We were in Japan and Singapore. Definitely check out the vlogs over here. There were a lot of vlogs, so because of that I haven't had like these kind of talking headshots in a while, but this will be my first one back from the honeymoon. So the one I want to talk about, and you probably can already guess from the thumbnail and the title, but I used to actually speak and write really bad English. English was not my first language, and I'll give you some context and how I did that. The reason why I wanted to talk about this is that I've actually had so many people that are not native speakers, or that they are immigrants, or they're from other countries, that say like, hey, I noticed you talk really well. You like speak perfect English, or not really perfect English. There are even some videos where people commented about the way I pronounced something, or the way that I said something, or even the misuse of a word, which, to be fair, like everyone does that at one point. So it's not just, even like perfect speakers make mistakes once in a while. But on internet, you're just being scrutinized. So for me specifically, I want to talk about how I actually got from point A to point B, because I have a lot of people that actually reach out to me like, how do I speak more coherently? How do I speak more confidently? To be fair, in the past, I was not confident. I was a confident person, but I was not a confident speaker because I was so insecure with my background. And in some ways, I was actually kind of ashamed that I was Chinese. So to give it all back to the very beginning, I am a Chinese American born in the US, born in New York specifically. My mom is born in China. My dad is born in the US. My mom is actually like really good English speaker for someone who came from China because she studied well. She was like apparently a top student. I don't know how much to believe that, but she was a top student there, and because of that her English was good. She came back here, she was like using her studious skills or studious abilities to study good English. But my dad, on the other hand, was not a good student at all, so he was really bad in his English. He talks like the people around him, and to be honest, I'm very similar to that too. So some context from that is, when you have a blended household like that, the first thing that my family was doing is like, we're gonna start with Chinese. So my first language was technically Cantonese, or like the town dialect. I honestly don't know which one came first, but we had 4 languages in our household: Cantonese, Mandarin, Toisanese, which is basically where my family is. My family's from Toisan or Taishan in China, and both of them technically, even though my dad was born here, and English as well. So because both of them had a broken English, all of the things I picked up in my early childhood was technically broken English or Chinese. I actually used to have, when I hear back on videos, had a Chinese accent, which is very different because I don't hear one. Apparently when I speak loudly, people can hear the Chinese accent in me, but I honestly don't think I have one right now. When I'm listening to me even speak, I don't think that I have a Chinese accent. But you would think that I was born in America and always had American accent or Long Island accent. So for me specifically, back then, the way that I'm speaking right now and the way I wrote right then was actually different from then, because the way that I'm speaking and writing today is very different from the way that I was back then. And I'm actually going to link my little college essay, because I actually talked about this whole journey about like battling with my demons on my cultural background. Like back then I was actually ashamed that I was Chinese, because I was like, why am I different? I was born here. I was raised in a similar environment than other people, but like, why is my English so bad? And it was 2 things. One is they started off with Chinese, not English, in my household. So naturally, Chinese was like the first thing I picked up, and then like I didn't really exercise my English. Only towards later on, my mom told me that they started to shift over to English because they saw I was struggling. So because of that, they were like, okay, you know what, we're gonna go into English. But because both of them had broken English, I was already struggling. So what can I possibly do? Oh, I just realized my little nightlight's not on. See, look. It's been a while since I have recorded, so I haven't done it, but like, look at that, so cute. But yeah, so moving on, I struggled, and these were the things that I did. I'm gonna talk about like what I did as a kid, because it does include what my parents have helped me with, like sending me to classes. But then later on, like middle school and high school, when it actually improved. Before, it was like going from borderline ESL, like they were actually thinking about like ESL versus like lowest level of English for me. So I actually took that test. I passed though. So I guess that was good enough, but from what I was seeing, like I still had issues with grammar and pronunciation. And when it came to pronunciation, it wasn't necessarily like issues with pronouncing, it was issues on stuttering and apparently the way that I wrote. And when I looked back, oh my god, I looked at journals back then. I did not journal, but those were like just like cute little stationery I got and I wrote things on. I basically wrote the way that I spoke. If you understand what I mean, I'm like let's say the one I just said, I'm like, I would have wrote I'm like. You don't write that technically when you're writing like a proper essay. And when I wrote essays, I'm like, everything spoke as if I was writing a script. It wasn't really an essay. It was a script, like how people would speak. Something like, I wrote that because that's just like what my dad would say. So I wrote how people spoke. I don't know how to explain that properly, but if you talk to people, it does not sound the way that people write in essays. Essays are specifically like, back then actually, like we had something called ELA, English Language Arts, and there was like I don't know what it's called now, but there's basically like the state assessments that they had for English, the reading comprehension and the writing and all that. It was very different writing style than like if you were speaking. So the way I wrote was very, very behind a little bit. I would say that it sounded like I was a kid. And when you're writing an essay, you're supposed to sound a little bit more mature. You're supposed to write like it's an essay, but I didn't do that. So my mom ended up sending me to a lot of classes. So there were like a lot of after school classes that technically I didn't actually want. And my English and my writing gradually improved. In the summer classes, I focused on English as well. I did not focus on math. It was because of my English. Or my writing, actually, I think specifically was the issue. So that's where I had issues then. And it started to gradually shift when I went to a different school district. And it's not because of the school district. I mean, that helped as well, like later on. But I will say the biggest thing that really helped me, which is very surprising, was that I read books. So in middle school, if you read the essay that I have down on the description below, you'll see that I read Princess Diaries. I don't know what it was that like got me to pick up the book. I think I was bored one summer and I went to the library, picked up the Princess Diaries, and I liked it. So I started to read the entire series. There's like a total of 10 books, I believe. So I read the entire series, and gradually I started to learn the right way to write. Not all those English classes, not all those writing classes, it was books. So, and then there's actually points where after that, I was like addicted to these books, and specifically young adult teenage, because it's a little bit more interesting. It's like a little bit more modern. It's not like, I didn't want something that I would feel like it's like work. So I didn't read any like Jane Austen or any of those classic books like Charles Dickens. Eventually I learned those in high school, but when specifically in this state, I wanted to only read books I wanted to read. So I read like Sarah Dessen, Nicholas Sparks. Okay, so Nicholas Sparks is a little bit too mature for people at that age, but I read them anyways. My mom was like, why are you reading Nicholas Sparks? But I basically read books I liked reading. Specifically reading, okay? Because I needed to see the way people wrote. If right now I actually read primarily books through audiobooks, but because I kind of know how to write, I don't do that anymore. I do audiobooks mostly on my commute and when I'm walking outside. So right now I would say that's what I do. But back then when I was still trying to learn how to like write in proper literature, it ended up being young adult books. So I would recommend something similar. Find something that you enjoy reading. I did read manga, but manga is not a good representation of how to write because you're just reading speech bubbles and little narration. That doesn't count. If you're trying to do better in your school studies and specifically the way you're writing in proper English and proper written literature, you should read books. And specifically books you really want or you're interested in. I would say if you're trying to understand at least like from, I don't know, it's been a while since I was in high school and middle school, but we learned a lot of a lot of fiction books, so a lot of classic literature. So naturally you would want to read fiction. I would say nonfiction later on, like that would be really helpful for college because a lot of the books you read or textbooks are actually nonfiction. But I would say in middle school, high school, you should read fiction because that's going to be very similar to the kind of language you will be seeing and producing in your essays and in your reading. So what I ended up doing was I read so many books where I would bring them to class, get that book confiscated, bring out another book. I was reading in class, okay? That was like it's embarrassing because I was supposed to pay attention to class, but I was reading a book. And it's honestly because they're page turners. Like, I really wanted to know what was happening next. So the books really saved me in that way, because if you find good books, or you find books that you're genuinely interested in the story specifically, I think what I ended up doing was I watched the movie and I heard there was a book, and then I read the book. I think that's what ended up happening. But I thought I liked it because I was like, if the story in the movie was good, then the book should be good too. So you could do something similar to, like, maybe you liked Harry Potter movies and you never read the books, read the books. Maybe you watched Game of Thrones and you liked Game of Thrones, maybe read the books. So now you can kind of connect it a little bit. And the way that when you're reading, you're constantly exposing yourself to the way that it's written, and you'll improve. If you're trying to improve the way that you write nonfiction, read nonfiction. This means like essays or emails, and I've actually learned a lot of the ways that I'm like, how would you start a sentence when you're talking about a new topic? And I kind of pick that up. Or what are the styles? Because you don't always have to write like it's a documentary or some kind of like scholarly article. You could write it in an article, like in a very free-flowing article, like a memoir. That's technically a nonfiction as well. How would they write that? How would you write that? So that's kind of something that I would consciously be picking up as I'm reading it. Not just to enjoy it, the content, but to actually pick up the way that they do things. And figure out like, oh, why did I like that? Okay, I'm gonna copy that. So just really be conscious of that. I wasn't the type of person to read the sidelines of the books, but like, if you want to do that, if you bought a book, go for it. For me, they were all library books. I could not do that, but I found that just overexposure was really good. So that's how I improved on the written side. The speaking side somewhat improved, but just to give you some background on the speaking side, because I always talked about the writings part, I stuttered a lot and I kept on, it did not sound like this at all. I'm trying to figure out how, I need to recall how I was back then, but I could not finish a sentence without going, like, repeating syllables and words. So, okay, I'm going to talk about what I did today. So this morning we woke up at 7:30 a.m. and right away we knew, okay, it's a lot of clients today for cat sitting because it's Memorial Day weekend. So the first thing we did was when we went to the household that had 4 cats, we pilled them. There were 2 cats that needed pills. And then I went to go off to do my own drop-in for this cat in Dumbo as well. And then Addison's going to go to the others in downtown Brooklyn. That's the correct way. Now the incorrect way that I was saying is like, so we woke up at 7:30 a.m. and then I went to then we went to the house with 4 cats, and we would take care of those 4 cats and pill them, and and then after that I would go to my own drop-in with this 1 cat and take care of that cat. Then Addison would go to downtown Brooklyn for the two other cats. So like, there's like 2 things that were going on there. One thing was I kept on stuttering and repeating myself and kept breaking up the sentence to the point where the listener is like, what did you just say? Because you kept on focusing and distracting over the actual stuttering and the repetition of the words. It also didn't sound like I was confident. The other thing was, you saw that I said, like, I had a lot of place fillers back then, or placeholders. I did a lot of so's, and I still say a lot of so's, but it's a lot more coherent now that, like, you don't really notice that anymore. It's just more flow. You don't really hear that unless it's like the once in a while, but back then it was like constantly. So it sounded very different, and to be honest, I'm glad I fixed that before interview season, because I would have sounded really bad. And that was just me telling a story. That was me speaking. That wasn't the way that I was actually talking. If I were to like read something. If I was reading something, that would be easier for me. I was actually in a high reading level group, which is why I did well. It was the reading portion of it, specifically reading, not exactly the comprehension of it. I had issues on that too, a little bit more on that later, but specifically writing, I wrote the way I spoke, and I had very, very broken grammar. I just didn't understand grammar. It was really hard for me to pick up. Second thing was speaking. I stuttered. I had a lot of placeholders. I was not confident. I constantly had like an accent in some ways. I spoke the words that, I basically spoke the way that my dad speak, because my mom, she speaks in very broken English. It sounds like Chinglish almost. Yeah, it is Chinglish. And then my dad, like he spoke in broken English. So naturally, the broken English is going to be what catches over to me, even pronunciations of some words. So I fixed all of that through writing, was through books, speaking was through having friends, and eventually it took practice to talk and everything. So when it came to that, it was mostly on talking to people, getting a little bit more confident. Honestly, with the speaking part, it carried me through until high school, where I started to realize, like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna stop stuttering. I'm gonna try to speak properly. I still had a lot of place fillers, but that's when in college I addressed that by just literally trying to pause instead of saying those words. So for the speaking part, honestly, a lot of it is just practice and speaking to people and talking to people and just gradually building confidence. But for me, the writing influenced the way that I was speaking. So the writing helped me basically think. I think the way that I speak right now is a little bit different from back then, was that I actually visualize the sentence I'm gonna say it and then I speak it. It's a little bit different because I think if you're in a second language, that'll be very difficult for you to do. But in my current English language, that's how I do it, where I actually like visualize the words before I speak it. So it's a way to like kind of pre-plan what you're going to say, and it prevents you from stuttering, because I realized when I was stuttering, it was because I didn't really think through what I was going to say. I said a lot of reckless things. Now I actually stop to think before I speak. So it helps you in some ways because you don't want to regret saying something, but at the same time, it helps you speak a little bit better because you're visualizing it, and you're not going to have any breaks for that reason. You might have at one point, if you have a very long sentence or long story, you might forget something, but the way that I do it is like I visualize the sentence and then I speak it, or if it's a paragraph, that I visualize the story and then I kind of figure out what's the start, middle, and end, which is actually very good, because if you think about it, that is very good for interview skills or when you're talking to someone, when you're trying to communicate a story. Speaking, I would definitely try to find ways to speak to people, either to your friends, and speak in the language that you're trying to improve. In my case, back then my mom and dad have always like messed me up with the Chinese and the English, but I was able to improve by sitting in the lunchroom with my friends and talking to them, and over time just improve speaking. And when I was working with other people, because I wasn't working with like the Literally Arts magazine, the school newspaper, the swim team, I had to find opportunities to speak and get a little bit more confident. The other thing I realized is like, because when I was like talking like this, so it was really not that easy to listen to people, and it was like easy to stutter. I also learned that to project, and that was actually something that I learned in college. So when I was presenting, I was presenting as if I was speaking to someone. That's not the way you do it, and now I project everything when I speak. I'm projecting right now as if I was in a presentation. I'm basically mobilizing my entire mouth when I speak something, so that it's very clear about what I say. Very easy to do that when you speak to a lot of people. So really, I think it's trial by error. You just keep on going until you figure out a way to actually speak to someone. I think I'm gonna do another video potentially, or if I don't have it, on public speaking, but specifically, a lot of times I have a lot of tips for those because I really sucked. Like I did DECA back then in high school. If you guys don't know what DECA is, I think it's like a US specific thing. It's like a business competition. I actually wrote a business plan, and every time you're supposed to pitch that business plan or pitch the business idea to like a group of investors. And in this case, it's a judge. So every single year I had a different specific business plan. The last year I finally actually got into the finals. So very first year, I was a freshman in high school. I did this program and I failed epically, because the way I did it was I literally looked at the slides and I read the slides. That's not how you do it. I essentially just spoke. I did not project. I did not present. So moving forward from there, I started to realize the way that I like to present, and everyone is a little bit different. That's why it's a good and a bad thing. There's a lot of presentation skills out there on like workshops, but to be honest, I think it really does depend on the type of speaker you want to be. It doesn't have to always be the same way of like have a script or have a bullet points. Like right now, I used to have bullet points and I'm just kind of rambling here, but I have a feeling that because of all the skills and all the experience I've had, I've just learned to kind of reel it in a little bit and be very focused on the way I speak. So no matter what I have, like whether or not it's scripted or not, I am prepared. Because at least I have it in here and I just need to say it out loud. So specifically for DECA, back then I would just read it off and I don't actually present. I have my script. I literally had a piece of paper and I read everything off, and I'm like, back then I was like, why did I fail? And it's because why would they need a presentation if you could just read everything off your script? Like that makes no sense. So moving forward, I just started to kind of slowly find out that I actually figure out that I'm better when I don't have a script. I have a guideline. So I could just kind of ramble and talk. It's a little bit more natural. Talks like you're having some charisma or that charisma, and that you're actually trying to talk to or present to the audience. So I've realized that was an easier way for me. And when I presented a lot in school, actually, it helped me each time. Specifically in my junior year, we had something called Core, where we did the same thing. We built a business plan, and each time we would present in like specific classes for depending on each particular part, like marketing plan, operation plan, finance plans. When we present, there's a lot of presentations. So for that specifically, it was, again, trial by fire. Just constantly keep going and you'll get used to it. So I always say, try to find opportunities where you can speak, either if you're like a leadership role, if you're going to a team meeting, or if you're going to meet with your friends, or if you're trying to go to some networking event. That's also another thing that I did to improve my speaking, specifically when I talk to people. So there's a difference between like speaking normally to like being better. So like you're better for the work environment or when you're presenting, was that I actually like put myself in those leadership roles. So I forced myself to speak and be in those uncomfortable environments. And eventually, and when it came to college as well, I did the same thing. I went to all those extracurriculars and basically went to all those and tried to speak my way. So the other thing that I did was I did a lot of one-on-ones. So I think it was around junior year, sophomore year, I went to a lot of networking events, and I would always force myself to do like at least 5, at least 10, and then try to talk to someone. That's like basically improving your small talk. And I think that that's very necessary because I was struggling in that. The other thing was that when I went to every single internship, I made sure to also schedule one-on-ones with people in the team, in the company. So I have a sense of how it was like. So for example, at Analytic Partners, I actually met up with all of the people, essentially, like every single person in every single role within the company, including the CEO. And I had questions prepared as well as ways to be able to answer them. Of like, if they had follow-up questions or if I had follow-up questions, I would know, thinking on the spot, how would I respond to that? And that actually improved me in consulting and in tech. So the other thing that I did was that when I did these specifically, I also did them in like informational interviews. I didn't do it just for informational interviews for jobs. So in this case, it was like a lot of networking when I was looking for jobs, and I forced myself to do these. I forced myself to talk to people. And again, a lot of it is really just like keep on doing it and you keep practicing it. I was also in the school newspaper, so by nature, you're supposed to be interviewing people for these. And it also took me a while because I had all these questions prepared. And then I was also like, okay, now when I get these questions, what am I going to do with this? So I had follow-up questions that came up. I like forced myself to come up with follow-up questions. Same thing happened when I was trying to figure out my concentration. I was going to all of the concentration leads in my school and was like, I'm going to have all these questions and then have them talk to me about it. And then I had follow-up questions, of course. So just constantly keep doing that, and then you'll get, it's a muscle. You need to keep working on that muscle. I think for my SATs, I had 790 on my math and 750 on my writing. I don't remember. I actually can't recall my SAT scores anymore, but it was in the 700 range, and I was like floored that my writing was that good. But on the reading comprehension, on the other hand, I suck at it, and honestly, for many different reasons. I can really recall this one because my SAT score for reading was 560. 560. All the others were 700 and up, but my reading comprehension sucked. I was in like a high reading group, but for some reason my comprehension skills just sucked. And I attribute that to, and it's not even English skills at this point, to my memory. I'm very good if you ask me a question and I go back to the text and I try to find it, but I'm not really good with, if you make me read the entire thing and I have to answer a question, I'm not gonna know that because I'm gonna be like, I forgot. So I have to go back in there. So it's not that I didn't comprehend it, it's that by the time I get to the question, I forgot it. It depends though, because I realize when I listen, I understand it a lot better than if I read it. Because when I read, I'm like trying to read. I'm still trying to read and understand what the actual word is saying. And I forgot the other hand. When I'm listening, I imagine as if someone's telling me a story. It's a little bit easier for me to comprehend. So that part I'm still working on. That's why I actually listen to audiobooks now. But like back then, I was struggling to reading comprehension, specifically in that kind of text. Because if it was an interesting book where I actually enjoyed it, I will like it and I will actually comprehend it better. But I will still have memory issues. If you ask me about like, oh, what was the color of the slipper that they said for me? That's a lot. So let me know what you think. Hopefully these tips help. But let me know if you're in your journey, like which part are you trying to improve? Are you trying to improve your writing, your speaking, your presenting, or even all of the above? Reading comprehension, to be honest, I'm still working on. I'm not really that, I wouldn't say reading comprehension has been improved, because I technically, when I do audiobooks, it's listening comprehension. But yeah, so let me know down below what you think, and hopefully these tips help. Have you done this before? Let me know.